Let's keep it under 8.
All right. April 24th, 2014. Welcome back to another podcast. I think we're on episode 13, and we were trying to figure out the topic for today, and we had lots of meaty things to weave in and out, and we finally just crystallized around this central question: what makes a story true? And by extension, how do those stories impact us? And by story, I mean we mean anything. The context is entertainment, biblical stories, personal stories that we've experienced and share with each other, and all this. And the reason we're asking this question is because we're observing a trend in our own lives of the things that appeal to us and the things that are easily emotionally engaging versus difficult to get emotionally engaged with, and why is that? And we kind of want to explore this topic a little bit, and to kind of give it a nudge in the general direction. I have this theory just based on observation and in my own entertainment habits and the things that I gravitate towards, the types of stories that impact me personally. And my theory is that what makes an impactful story is the measure of truth in that story. And I think this is why so many very dark and oppressive stories are so appealing to so many people. I think a lot of the vast majority of the movies we see out there, the television series, you name it, there's an element of truth to them all. Otherwise, we'd have this natural revulsion for them, or we would reject them. But I think we watch them and get engaged with them. We connect with the characters. We follow the stories, sometimes over a period of years, depending on how many seasons a particular story might run. And we invest in those stories because there's an element of truth. But the truth is twisted, and so we're getting kind of um, this sort of corrupted version of the truth. But are we discerning that as we go? Are we recognizing where it falls short of biblical truth? And what's the yardstick that we need to be holding up to everything that we allow in our minds, in our hearts, and our emotions, and by extension, how do those things change who we are? How do they change how we think? How do they change how we treat other people and relate to other people? How do they affect us at a fundamental level? And what's the gap? What is the gap? Should we not be getting more excited about content that has more truth? And obviously, the ultimate authority that we have in each of our own lives is the scriptures as 100% truth. Um, and so, yeah, fascinating question. And there are so many examples we could use, to illustrate this. One of my favorite ones is The Matrix. I always go back to that. But yeah, what do you guys think? Like, how do we identify truth in stories, and what makes an impactful story?
Yeah, what makes impactful stories? And to me, it's, as you were saying that, I was just seeing this trend that it's beyond stories, and it's just what makes something believable. So the best lies are lies that are covered in truth, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just this weird thing that you can sell something to anybody to motivate them, or you can even digest something yourself, like you said, as long as it has truth mixed in with it. And that's the enemy's core um, deception device, right? He leverages truth, even the Bible, even good things in our lives, to pull us away from pure truth or righteousness. And um, I just find that so engaging, and it's such a relevant topic to me because I do believe we want to live stories, like we want to live lives that are worth telling a story about, and to live a good life. And you could take that, if I apply it to my life, I could live a story that is mixed with truth, but is also mixed with the profane, and that's not the life that I want to land on. But it's very easy to do that. It's very easy to mix good things and truth-based things in my life with wrong things, evil things, sinful things, and that's like the pursuit. Like I want to get to the end and live a life that was based on truth. And so I
Yeah,
know
and is there
that's a tangent, but I
no,
see
is
it
there
in all those ways.
a placebo effect going on too? Do we get some of our satisfaction as a human being designed to walk out incredible stories, do we have some of that need met vicariously through the experiences we have by watching, by just passively watching something or playing games or whatever? Like, is there that placebo kind of going on?
Hmm.
I I think absolutely there's a placebo effect there, and I think part of that, like I think part of the reason that happens is because sometimes in your own life, like it feels like you're just going day in and day out, and like you don't always get to see like the story top down, like we do when we're watching a movie or playing a game or reading a book. Like you can consume the whole story and see the whole picture and see how amazing it is, like holistically versus like you're only getting to see like part of your story as it's going, and it might seem slow, whereas like a movie obviously they're cramming it into 2 hours, so you get a lot more, and it affects your emotion like a lot more. And then like I think with the whole like truth element, I think that's right on. Even I think I relate that to like people injecting enough truth that makes something believable, and like we were just talking about like the evil side of that, like how if you just sprinkle enough truth you can sell whatever you want, right? But I was like I was thinking about while you were saying that, I was thinking about the show The Office, like a comedy show, right? And like why is that show so great in my opinion? Like, or why is it so funny, right? Is because they take these people and they take a little bit, like an element from all these people that someone just a little bit like that. Like you're like, oh, Andy from The Office, like I know a guy who has that, like a sliver of that guy, and like here's another sliver from this guy, and they ram it all into this one person that's not possibly real. No one's like actually like that, but there's enough truth of like your five friends or people at your office that like it makes it seem really relatable, and like that guy, like I don't know, you can relate to him and like feel it and stuff, and there's a lot of emotion. And I think, I don't know, I feel like I definitely get taken advantage of with like the time, and I don't realize how amazing maybe some of the stories that are in my own life or in the people that I live next to, because they're not happening as quickly right in front of me or something.
Hmm.
Yeah, well, we invest into these people, right? Because they, to some extent, they become almost real to us. Like
Hmm.
it's sad to say, but I can tell you the backstory on fictional characters better than I can tell you the backstory on some people that I know in real life.
Hmm.
And so we get engaged with that, and I think part of the appeal there is that those characters are, there's two things going on at the same time. The characters are exaggerated, and yet there's also, like you're saying,
Yeah.
this very real fundamental truth to them. But what that, I think, way that appeals to us is because as a society, culture, etc., we're generally repressed. Like we self-repress the way we really feel about something, and we love to see a character in a story, in a book, whatever, who's actually not repressing who they are. And so we think, now there's someone who's actually doing what we want them to do, or maybe we don't want them to do it, but they're being authentic in a
Hmm.
way that we don't see authenticity around us in general. And I'm thinking back, like, to connect this to sort of personal stories. Shaw, what you said something really neat, relating to, I'm gonna totally forget it now. Oh yeah, like the time slices, right? The A book or a movie or a show, we can get the full picture compressed into this, really digestible thing that has the weight of the entire impact in a very small moment of time. And I think, for example, connecting that just as an observation, observer watching some of Ken's story unfold down there in Costa Rica, he's in a position where he's got a really critical role in some relationships that are happening down there right now. But that critical role isn't obvious, like, through all the difficult challenges that him and Megan have had. Just the stuff that they do on a daily basis. Like you said, Shaw, there's this grind that we go through in life, and we don't connect the grind to the necessity of our role when it comes to a critical moment in time. But all of that is foundation for being where we're supposed to be, when we're supposed to be there, and having this, um, major plot moment, if you will, that couldn't exist if we didn't kind of trudge through all the other things that we think of as mundane, right? Um,
Yeah, I love that Shaw said the top-down story because it triggered a lot of things for me. But the biggest thing is I don't appreciate my story. I don't appreciate the story that I'm living out because I only see today's day, right? I see each moment as it comes, and and so it's really hard to appreciate the beauty or the power, the impact of our story. And I also think that it works in the opposite way when we look at other stories top down. It sets false expectations for us.
Hmm.
And so it's really easy to compare, you know, you take your life and you say, okay, I want biblical authority in my life, and so I'm going to look at what do these people do in the Bible, and it's like, okay, Moses was this great man of God, right? He stood face to face with God. You know, that's an unbelievable feat, and everything else he did. But then, you know, as Andrew reminded us the other day, when I was really frustrated with something, I can't remember what it was. He said, "Hey Ken, how do you feel? You know, how do you think Moses felt when he went from being Pharaoh's like right-hand dude to wandering around in the wilderness for 40 years before God used him, you know, for something big?" And it's like, wow, like I get the top-down story in the Bible in a couple pages, and then I don't realize, like, what does it look like to actually do something for 40 years? And so then it sets up a false expectation in my life, right? Like, I want it today, and then our culture only amplifies that because the culture is very demand-driven. But that top-down story idea is very, very interesting because I don't appreciate my story, and I think looking at stories top-down sets up false expectations for myself.
Mm-hmm. So
Yeah,
we've almost been programmed to, it's feeding this instant gratification kind of mentality about even our own lives. You know, never mind the things that we want, the material things that we want. You know, the things that we want to do or accomplish in life have also been impacted by this instant gratification where, you know, if we go through a normal day of hugging the wife and you know, kissing the kids and putting them to bed, we don't feel satisfied because it's like, this is just another day. But if we could view that in a bigger context, we would see how critical that even the normal is.
Yeah,
hmm
yeah.
Yeah, that's really, it's funny because I was thinking about other forms, like books and movies and stuff. But yeah, thinking about the Bible, that's very interesting because yeah, Moses in the desert for 40 years, or even Jesus, like I mean, well, he was 30 something. What about the what about the other 30 years that we didn't get to hear about? You know, I'm sure it was incredible, but like you don't get a like view into every moment and just like yeah, you're
Yeah, or David waiting years, you know, to be king, like when he'd
that
already been
proper
anointed.
expectation, like
Yeah.
yeah, the false expectation is so interesting, you know, and like when you're
Everyone.
doing it, yeah, when you're in that the
Joseph.
middle of that, wow.
It's just, yeah, it's crazy. Joseph, Paul's ministry, right? Like the Timothy, it goes on and on. And we,
Noah building an ark for 100 years before it started raining.
yeah, and I think that's what, you know, we before we got on the call, we were talking about why do we gravitate more towards things on demand videos services, you know, and versus like getting engaged into our biblical stories. And I would compare it to the and this is kind of interesting, the Bible versus the books I read, the movies I read, and the plays I go to. I think it's more engaging because it's more in detailed to some extent. Now the Bible is interesting. The reason that it's more engaging to me and that I can't go a day without being in it is because it's literally the only thing I've ever done or read that's alive. It changes me every day. Like it has like physical power in it, and that's probably a whole nother topic. But it is more engaging. But there's this like natural tendency to want to be entertained, which I think is incorrect to desire to want to be entertained to escape my present reality. But in looking at it all, biblical stories, you know, you have thousands of years packed into one book, and so it's hard to get the full story. Whereas if I read, you know, there's a book called Iscariot, and it was about Judas who betrayed Yeshua, you know, one of his disciples that had betrayed him, and it was 400 pages just on him, and it was so engaging because I got all the details and all the meat, and I got to follow the character, and it followed all the lines of story, right? Like conflict, develop the character's background, set the scene, there's triumph, failure, all this stuff, and that's what we see in movies and books. And and
What was
in the
that?
Bible, we can only get. There's so much to say. I spilled my coffee on my computer. That's awesome. There's so much to say that it makes it really hard. So much to say, so many characters to put it in one thing, which I think is why it's also important for us to take the time to add supplemental studies to what we're reading in the Word.
Yeah,
and while you were
go for it, Sean. Go ahead.
like, you made me think of something. Hopefully, I don't derail you. Maybe write down what you're about to say. But while you were saying that, like about the Bible, hopefully I don't forget what I wanted to say. Dang it! It was kind of about, yeah. It was like maybe for me at least, like I was putting some dots together. Like I get really intimidated by the Word and by like the vastness of the Word and like the many options and opportunity for different interpretation and all that, and just like all that can go into the study of the Word and like what like Father is saying to us and like what we are supposed to be doing and all that. Like I get really intimidated by that, and like lots of times like I probably shouldn't joke about it, but like lots of times I just joke around about like how I just like walk around in a constant state of confusion, like, and it's not like bad. It's just like I'm always in like I have all these questions and like I want to know the answers and like all this, and I think sometimes I get drawn to things that have a start and an end, and it's very clear like what the message is or like what the story is. Like you read a book, just like you were saying about Iscariot, you have like it's just about that, you know? And like the Bible is so massive and so big that like I just freak myself out, and I'm just like I just have a stack of stuff I want to study and go through and all that. And sometimes I think I throw the towel in before I start grabbing stuff off the top of the stack, because it's easier to log into Netflix or turn on the PlayStation or whatever, you know? Like
something that stands out to me. Sorry, I'll make it quick. That stands out to me on that is that's also it's a manual to our life, and we're called to study it for our entire life. And it's called a book, and it's words bound to pages, but it's interesting because when I call it a book in my mind, I think like, okay, yeah, I want to read it once, and like that's what it is, and put it on the shelf and move on. But it's not really a book, and I think that's the difference because of everything you just said. It is meant to be a lifelong study.
Yeah,
whereas a book is not meant to be that.
You said it's living, you know, and like sometimes I don't always think it's funny as I've gotten older. Like, yeah, I looked at the Bible when I was young, and I'm like, yeah, this is a book. If I could read it once, that would be great, you know, because I like had such like small expectation, I think, when I was younger. And then like now I look at it, and as I read it more, like it grows and grows and grows. Just like, you know, like when Harper walks in here, I'm like, dang, he's 6. He's a lot bigger. That's how I feel about the Bible. Like it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and like it's crazy. It's like totally a living thing, you know?
Yeah, well, the Word is a person, and that's, it's easy to forget that because the best, the best we can do is either the printed words on a page or an electronic version or whatever. That's what we have, but it's limiting to think that that's the best that we have. When we realize that it is a person, that it's Yahushua himself, the Word become flesh, and he is the Word, and so we have this expression of who he is in bound format. But really, if we approach it as just a book, then yeah, we're gonna miss the relationship aspect that happens every time we dive in there. And I think the thing that's hard, that you were kind of articulating what I was going to say, is we want answers. Like that's the whole, it's so easy for us to latch onto something that gives us an answer, whether we like the answer or hate it. But when we go to the Word, we're going to a person, and so there are answers there, but there's also lots of questions, and that's unsettling because the Word demands something from us. A show, a game, a book doesn't demand anything from us. We can consume it, we can appreciate it, we can enjoy it, we can agree, we can love the characters or hate the characters, but it demands nothing from us. The Word, because it's a person, demands that we change. because it's a mirror on our life, and it shows us where we are not walking the way our Creator created us to, designed us to, and set an example for us to walk that way. And so it can be unsettling if we approach it truthfully, authentically, and honestly with ourselves. And I think the reason that, kind of circling back to our original question, the reason that it's so easy to get sucked into the enemy's version of story, where there's truth mixed, where there's a lot of falsehood laced with truth, is because it has answers for us, and we can consume it passively, and we can not feel convicted by it, and we can even relate to the darkest of characters because we recognize the sin in our own lives. And lately I've been kind of exploring different shows that I've been curious about, and I'll get 4 or 5 episodes in, and I'll come to a point where I'm like, I really want to know what's going to happen, but I hit this wall of like, I can't keep watching this show. Like, it's not producing a good thing in my life. And I'm asking myself, what about this particular show is bothering me? And a common thread that I found through them all, different ones, and to make it super real, just like the 100, even Battlestar Galactica, to go back to kind of an older one, Defiance, like some of these, I love sci-fi, so for anyone else who kind of relates to that, but there's such a difference between shows today, and you can see that progression even, I mean, the Battlestar Galactica of 20 years ago, night and day difference, right? You put those two next to each other, and it's just, what has happened to our culture in 20 years. But the thing that bothers me personally is that I'm being sucked into characters that I can relate to on a humanity level, but they're making decisions and they're doing things that are reprehensible. And they're the heroes, they're the good guys, and yet their actions are justified by the circumstances they've been put in. So you don't blame them. You understand why they're murdering, why they're cheating on each other, why they're doing these very fundamental things to survive. But at the same time, we don't. What bothers me is that I'm not more bothered by what they're doing, and I realize, wait a minute, our morality standard is way out of whack, and that's why we have to go back to the Word and get grounded in a morality. I'm not just talking about a religious morality. I'm talking about a morality that's connected to every physical law of the universe. I mean, there are moral laws that are just as real as gravity, and when those are violated, it leads to all kinds of chaos in relationships, in mind, body, spirit, and it just, the ripple effects go out from there.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because something triggered in me, and I recognized that I was putting a lot of unhealthy media into my mind, or just maybe more than it was a higher priority in my life than it needed to be. So you were asking that why, and as you were thinking, there's actually a really crazy, it's not a coincidence, I think it was intentionality that happened that I didn't even know. And so anyways, I had this convicting thought about 6 weeks ago that I should give up media for a month, like all media. And I was like, oh, that's convicting. And then I looked out at the jungle and was like, the jungle looks really beautiful. And
Uh-oh.
I think he's still out.
Hope we didn't lose him to the jungle.
We might have. I see
Well,
where he was going.
yeah, we'll keep it going until he comes back. He might be having a Costa Rica moment, but yeah, like you don't. And I have no idea how far he was going to take this, but I can relate in the sense that you don't notice the things that are around, the beauty of the things that are around you when you're engaged, when your brain is occupied by a fabricated beauty or a fabricated reality.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of puts, I mean, I know speaking about myself, and I see it in my kids too, and like that's the most interesting thing. And they are, I mean, we have a pretty strong limit, and that's a constant balancing act. How much do we limit, exposure and those things? How much do we protect their innocence but not let them get crazy curious about things, right? And that's a constant juggling act. But we do have very strong limits on entertainment, games, visual media, but our especially our two oldest are crazy readers. I mean, it is nothing for them to go through like 3 or 4 books in a week, like big books, chapter youth books, kind of young adult books. And we try to monitor that too, but there's no, like, I can't keep up with what they read. And so that's like, in the back of my mind, I'm wondering, okay, what are they filling their heads with? And we
Mm-hmm.
try to moderate that. Like we, look at the books they bring home from the library and all of that. And for the most part, we're confident that we're training them, in basic discernment for themselves so that, they would recognize, and we try to engage with them on conversations. And that's all of a roundabout way to say, even given the best books, the most wholesome, books, there's still something that bothers me when they just unplug and dive into a book. And I mean, I see, like, we have to call their name 3 or 4 times to get them to come back to reality and like help their brother or sister or whatever. And it's super interesting just how easy it is to get sucked into something that's not this, that's not this reality.
Yeah, that
Um,
is, yeah, it's so interesting because it's like, most people, parents that I know and even ourselves, like our kids are probably a little too young for like chapter books and things like that. But Harper's starting to take hold of reading, and he's funny. He does like research and stuff, and so like he gets all these books about wasps and bees and all this stuff, and he can get sucked in quite a bit. But he is definitely like a media hound, like his dad. Like I
mhm.
like that stuff too, and like what I've found like lately is like Emily's much better at it than I am, but like we too like limit like what they're allowed to like how much time and like what they're allowed to watch and stuff, and I don't always do the best job at that, because I get distracted like or I'm working or whatever.
Mhm.
But it it's hard because sometimes like Harper's like I want to just play games or whatever, and go play a video game, and I'm having to tell him no, but like as soon as he goes to bed, like I'll go down and watch TV or play a game. It's like how I
Mhm.
unplug, which is funny because I'm
Yeah.
unplugging, or like how I
Plugging
relax.
in, yeah.
Yeah, it's like I
Yeah,
go
I
to the
know.
screen to get away from the screen, and I don't know,
Yeah.
like why am I drawn to that versus like drawn to like, man, maybe I should go read the word, or maybe I should do something that like physical to help like with the family or something like that. And I'm always saying, oh, I wish I had time to do X.
Mhm.
And like it's interesting because like in my head I don't have that time, but like you add half an hour to an hour a night of you know that media time, and maybe I do have time.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm just gonna stop super quick here and pray that Ken gets back on, or whatever. I mean, maybe this is Father's plan too for this show. But Father, yeah, we just ask that whatever situation's going on with Ken's connection, whether it's power or internet or whatever, that you would resolve that quickly so that he can join back in this conversation. Or we just ask that you would help us to continue on with however you want this to unfold. So thank you for this conversation. Pray that you bless Ken and get him back online as quickly as possible.
Hmm.
Amen.
Funny.
But yeah, like I'm thinking too about um, yeah, how it influences our kind of perception of normal, and we know we kind of compartmentalize and we think when we're watching a show, we know, okay, this is not real, this is not reality, and yet the more we're saturated by what we take in, it does affect our thinking. It does feel more normal, to us, and it sort of puts this cloud around real relationships and real perceptions and real experiences. And I can't remember where I read this idea, but it's a fascinating idea to me. And someone made the point that, um, and I don't know if there have been studies or just this is observational, but um, the impact that it has on our reaction time to things. So, for example, we're so used to seeing, violence or whatever, and if we're confronted with that in real life, it causes this, it induces this state of passivity where we're so used to disassociating with violence because of what we watch that we disassociate when we're confronted with real violence. And so, in terms of, if we see someone getting mugged, and I haven't been in any of these situations, but when people see someone getting mugged or assaulted, or even I've seen it in myself, even in just intense arguments, like this tendency to kind of withdraw into ourselves. I was in Safeway. I think I shared this already on even on a podcast maybe, or maybe with just you guys when we were talking, and there was this super angry customer that just was practically yelling and cursing out the guy at Safeway, and I wanted to say, like, lady, shut up, like that's not how you treat someone. But I was just, I was in this sort of, what do I do with this situation? Whereas um, one of the fundamental principles from, I think, John Eldridge and the whole kind of wild at heart spectrum of work is that a true man resists passivity. And so here's this cultural influence of being forced to be in a passive role when violent things are happening, things that we would otherwise naturally want to prevent, and you can't prevent them because it's not real. And does that induce in us a an unhealthy passivity when we're confronted with similar things in real life? Um,
Hmm.
just a super interesting thing. So it's something that, being aware of, I'm trying to be mentally prepared to not be passive if confronted with things, you know, right in
Yeah.
front of me. But I think, like, kind of to weave, I know you wanted to get on topic of like preppers and stuff, and preparing for the worst case scenario. And I think that this sort of general passivity issue is going to be a massive issue if there are any kind of either local or national catastrophes, where confronted with something that defies the routine, like in such a way that it's life threatening and also incomprehensible. The only time we encounter the incomprehensible is in fiction right now. But
Mhm.
if we have to deal with the incomprehensible in real life, how do we handle that? And I think there's kind of two approaches. Either there's the deer in the headlights, like, mental breakdown kind of reaction, or there's sort of the stereotypical prepper's reaction that would have this thought through ahead of time.
Yeah, that's a whole like interesting topic because I think there's a lot of shows out there, content, like whatever, that like have this bend on this like post-apocalyptic type like situations and like and all that. So like I've just been thinking about it more and then like thinking about like what the Bible says about that and like what we're supposed to do and how faith like plays a role in that and stuff and like you know I don't know, like stocking up things or like using them to people who need to eat today's advantage and like how do you approach all that and like how does faith like play into it? And I've watched some of these like there's some like shows on preppers like
Mm-hmm.
called Doomsday Preppers and then there's one called like uh Doomsday Bunkers or something like that. It's like these
Mm-hmm.
people who spend like this one dude spent like $500,000 on like this like bug out like bunker location. They have like food for like 2 years and like guns and this and that. And I'm just like, are we called to that? And then I'm like, is there any where's that in the Bible and stuff? And then I was thinking about it earlier and I was like, okay, like Joseph in Egypt was like
Right.
pretty bad to the bone prepper, like, but
Yeah.
God, like I think God told him to do that. Like, is God telling us to do anything like that? And I don't know. Then I think some of those guys are just weird. And then like, but it's eerily attractive too. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know why. And then like, yeah, we were talking about shows, and I was thinking about like The Walking Dead and like things like that. Like I watched that show and I actually really liked it. And I like the whole time I was watching it, I was like, you know, wondering what people think like because I like that show or whatever and yeah like the post apocalyptic like survival situations and then like
Mm-hmm.
yeah watching these prepper guys and it's just crazy. You're playing that there's a PlayStation game that I loved called The Last of Us and it's like after this whole like virus weird post apocalyptic semi it's not like a zombie game but it's kind of like that and like
Mm-hmm.
just how these guys like what these guys did and how they survived and moved about and like all that and it's just
Yep.
like and then you think about like a real life situation like whether it's a natural disaster or like a war situation and like some of those prepper shows we're talking about like if trucks go down like in the US, like, you pretty much have about 3 or 4 days before there's no food on the shelves anymore, and like there's no water, and like what do you do? And like where does
Yeah.
like when people are coming after like your food or your supplies or something, like what's the biblical response and stuff? And like I think I
Yeah.
know the answer to that, and it's not what all those shows say.
Right.
And it's like it's interesting, and it's just like, but I think God's a lot bigger. Like if if your family is to be invisible to all the crazies out there, if something were to happen, like I think it would be, like it
Hmm.
does.
Yeah, it's fascinating, the surge. Even just thinking, 1 or 2, 3 decades ago, there were the fringe case movie or whatever, or book or whatever. And, people thought about and people have always thought about the end of civilization. I mean, and in fact, it's a historical reality. I mean, civilizations have collapsed. I mean, the Mayans, the Egyptian Empire, the Babylonian Empire, Persian Empire, Roman Empire, and Empire. Like, empires have always collapsed. We haven't really, as a planet, faced anything threatening all of humanity all at once. But we've thought about this historically throughout all of human civilization, and yet there seems to be something unique in our generation where, and maybe it's partly fueled by technology, partly fueled by advances in entertainment and everything else, where there's this general consciousness of, I mean, it's literally flooding entertainment now of end time scenarios, of apocalyptic scenarios, and I think maybe that's connected to the fact that we now have the tools to wipe ourselves out, from nuclear to whatever. And obviously the increase in worldwide, not worldwide, in disasters worldwide around the world, natural disasters, the increasing intensity and frequency, kind of maybe have a general global consciousness sort of veering in that direction. But super interesting to see how much as a species we're thinking about the end of our species,
Hmm.
and that kind of gives me pause. It's very curious to sort of think about, and that would actually be an awesome topic to open up, dedicate a whole podcast to. What was Joseph's response, in the famine, and he had a warning about it, right? And the warning was given to the secular leader at the time, but
Hmm.
Joseph had the answer how to prepare. Yay, we got Ken back! Woohoo!
Yeah, there he is too.
All right, so we should have taken bets, but well, let's see. Power, internet, water. What did you lose?
Battery.
No, not battery. It was internet, and they literally came and cut the cable in half.
Oh my
Not
gosh.
not even joking. I just took a picture of it. So it's such a long story, so I won't waste the podcast. But basically, we've been on auto payment, and they auto bill us, and then their system doesn't register that we've been paid, and they keep shutting it off. But this time, and then I have to call in and say I paid, and they're like, yeah, you did pay. We actually charged you more than we are supposed to. And then, anyway, so today I'm like, what's going on? I go down, look at the router, no internet. I look outside, and there's a guy, and he's up on a ladder in the air, and there's like two cables in his hand, and he literally just like sliced the cable in half. And I'm like, what are you doing? And he's
Oh
like,
man.
no payo. And so, anyways, so I just gave him a lot of money, so it means we overpaid again, but it was a way to get him to connect it back, pay the bill that he thinks outstanding that's not, and then I'll have to call and see if we can get the credit back. I don't know. But anyways,
Oh gosh.
it is unbelievable.
So
I was gonna
you
tell you guys a really good story, but I don't know how far you guys are into other things.
No, I think
I
we
think
were at
we
a
could
good.
go back. Yeah.
Yeah, we
So
can
you
go
were
back.
talking about the jungle and looking out into it and the media
Yeah,
fast and all
but
that.
we prayed that you would get back on. So I'm thankful that,
There you
like
go.
like a cut cable is
Seriously, it's a miracle
that's
that
impressive reconnection time off of a cut cable.
I know. I was like, muy rápido.
You've got splicing
But
skills, man. That's cool.
yeah.
Oh.
Um,
Yeah, no, just to catch you up super quick, and I definitely, I think you're about to say some tasty stuff. We'll go back to it. We kind of touched on the preppers conversation, and we were just looking at um, how much our our generation is saturated with end time scenario entertainment books. Like just everybody thinking about whether it's disaster movies or whatever. Super interesting. And then just kind of wanting to, we probably should have a whole podcast dedicated to that and look at that biblically. Like, what should our biblical response be to an end times scenario, even local disaster type scenarios in our area, people in need, all those questions, right? And of course, you got the paradigm of Joseph, you got the paradigm of Noah, and there's a few other ones, but that would be awesome to unpack. But anyway, what everyone's appetite for that in the future. Yeah, going back, you were talking about you went on this media fast and you looked out into the jungle and saw the guy cutting your internet cable.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. And guy was like, "You're done with media for a while."
You're really done.
I don't have self-control, so I had to have someone else help me.
Cut off your right hand if it offends you. Better to enter the kingdom without a hand.
So I think that it would be great to unpack that other stuff, and I think you look at Daniel. Daniel was a great, right? He was exiled in the Babylon, so that would be a great story to unpack too. But as far as media goes, I was just talking about myself and seeing how it affects me. And yeah, I had this thought, this convicting thought, hey, maybe you should give up media for a month. And then I looked in the jungle and I thought, the jungle looks really beautiful and I want to forget that thought. And so I tried to forget it. And that night, Megan brought up the same thing to me. She didn't quite say it the same way, but she had brought up something that I knew was a confirmation from Father. And so we started praying, and I said, you know, God, should we really do this? Should we really do this? And we felt like we were, and so we said, okay, let's go for it. And the things that stood out to me, what's funny too is before I was talking for a long time before I knew that it was cut. So I feel like I'm repeating this story to everybody, but nobody's heard it yet. I was like, why does Andrew just keep smiling at me? Like I was like, wait, is he frozen? Anyways,
guys,
going back to it, the reasons that I knew I was supposed to do it was because there was a few key things there, and the first one was I didn't want to do it. I desperately didn't want to do it, and I shared that with you guys, and that stood out to me really powerful. Like nothing. What that told me is it had too much importance in my life. It was out of place and priority in my life, and so I knew that if it was going to cost me that much, and I was that bummed about it, it's way too important. So that was already a good sign. And then I started evaluating, and I said, wow, like I use this if I'm stressed out. It's a great way to relieve stress, you know, get on at the end of the night, watch a movie with Megan, and just try to like let my mind de-stress. If we were, you know, date night, because there's nothing to do down here, me and Megan, you know, our big crazy date night is let's sit on our two separate twin beds and watch a Netflix movie together. If I was bored at night, you know, like that was like a thing to do. And so I realized it was fulfilling all these things, and I was like, back to what we talked about. That's not really a story worth telling, right? Hey, what'd you do? Oh, I go to work and then I watch Netflix. You know, like that's not a story worth telling. And so because of all those things, I realized this is fulfilling a lot of things in my life that it shouldn't be. And it'd be really healthy for me to get away from that. And this is really going to be a bummer. And so we did it. So we both agreed to it, and we're like, let's do this. And the cool thing that's not coincidence that I totally believe is Father's just intentional timing. And this is something I never told you guys. Is that we started that on a day, and we said we just picked an arbitrary date, and we said we'll watch again the same day that this is over. That'll be our last day, and it just happened to be the 14th of March that we did that, and so the night of Passover was our last night on this fast. So we basically had this month of preparing our minds and cleansing our minds from all this junk that we've been putting into it, leading up to Passover, and getting to really take that time to like really see the leaven in our lives and all that other stuff. And I was just like, man, God is so intentional. That's crazy. You know, religions do, you know, Lent, and we could talk about that whole thing some other time. But for me, it was such a healthy time, and it was perfect timing to really get me ready to like really have my mind clean and just to remember what God did for me, what Yeshua did for me. And so I just thought that was really, really cool how it worked out like that. But in the end, it was phenomenal. Like, I feel like I was able to hear God clearer. Me and Megan we had to figure out different ways to entertain ourselves and to have dates, and it sounds stupid, but it was really healthy for us to try to grow in a lot of that stuff. And then to take it full circle, the fast is over, and I find myself like wanting to go back to it really, really quickly. So this conversation is very timely for me as well.
That's interesting.
That's
Renee,
cool.
one of the questions Renee asked about everybody out there doesn't, well, some of the people watching probably do know, but random people won't know the crazy rash you just went through and stuff. And one of Renee's questions was, and we've all been asking this as we've been praying for you and about this, I'm sure you have too, what is Father trying to teach you through that? And one of Renee's questions was, and kind of in the back of my mind too, what is this a manifestation of either a previous toxin that's getting out of you, or something else that Father wants to teach you or whatever? And I think everything is interconnected that way. And that was such an extreme experience, and I don't think it was a coincidence that it happened at kind of the tail end of all that, of your media fast and then Passover and then unleavened bread, and kind of here in the middle of unleavened bread you get this insane poison ivy type rash.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's very plausible, and I think it makes a lot of sense. I don't have any specific clarity on it. I mean, like sometimes things just go wrong and they go awry, and it was it's Hirsch oil from cashews, which is the same poison that's in poison ivy and poison oak, um, but I didn't tell you guys this, but one thing that was really interesting is that song "My Grace Is Enough" played in my head. Like there was like probably 8 days that were like just horrific, terrible. And that song played in my head every day, and I just can't remember being like, man, like what's it like for people that have debilitating things year after year? Like how do they hang on to that message, my grace is enough? And so I hope that it gave me empathy to understand when people are in helpless situations. And I also believe that God was, we had an opportunity to go the pharmaceutical route or not the pharmaceutical route. And what's interesting is today when I was reading in Kings, God was talking about how Israel finally, he kicks them out of the promised land, and because they turned to X, Y, and Z, and one of the things they turned to was sorcery. And going back to just the root of pharmaceutical being sorcery, and you could look that up in Wikipedia. That's its pure definition. It was interesting, but I had a choice to do that, and I'm not totally opposed to if you need medicine you can, but I try to do natural routes if I can, and it peaked, and it kept getting worse, and I was like, okay, I need to do this, and we didn't have access to a car, and it was hard to get to the doctors and all that, but we ended up getting an opportunity to get some steroids. I got them, but I never took them. And how to bring this full circle? So I got the medicine. I didn't take it, and in those times, I just feel like one of the things that God's really been showing me is if I'm willing to walk through it. Because if I took the steroid, I wouldn't feel it anymore. My body would still be walking through it, but I wouldn't feel the rash and the itch and all that stuff. If I did, and this is for me, and again, this isn't like, this is what everyone should do that ever gets poison ivy. But for me, I felt like he told me, like, if you want to walk through this, like, you'll be stronger because of it. And I'm hoping that it means physically, like my immune system, but it might just be mentally or spiritually. But I felt like that's answering your question, Andrew, what do I think I got from it? I feel like God, he was trying to give me empathy for people that are in helpless situations, and I have no clue what it's like to do that for years, obviously. As well as he was I felt like he said, like, this is going to make you stronger. And we try to cop out of that, but like it's so important. Like we'll crumble if we don't go through hard things in our lives, and so to be able to appreciate them with humility and with happiness, is man, that's going to be a lifelong lesson for me.
Yeah, I think one of the something you said just kind of triggered a new thought for me too, or it reminded me of one of the overall themes I see across, not 100% all, but the vast majority of entertainment, whether it's books, movies, shows, whatever, is kind of this general pervading hopelessness, and like you see these characters acting out of hopelessness, and there's always, most of them will try to portray this, what they're defining as hope, but really it's not hope. I mean, it's like, it's back to that kind of placebo effect that we were talking about, and really when you step back and you analyze the entire situation, you realize that most of those characters, all the characters, whatever, they're traumatized by what they've been through, and they're really behaving in a way that's hopeless. And I think a lot of times, whether it's, and again, who am I as a man to even speak about this, other on the basis of what my wife has chosen to go through, but avoiding the pain of childbirth, like of childbearing and labor, like wanting this escape, from that, walking through that very difficult thing. Again, like you experienced, Ken, having this choice of like having some unnatural relief from what you're going through, and and or having this choice to kind of like try to walk through it as best you can and deal with it. And we do have this induced escapism where, you know, like modern psychology would say, well, you know, post-traumatic stress or whatever, you know, has to be dealt with and worked through, but it doesn't offer a redemptive hope to it. There's kind of a coping sort of hope. You know, we can talk through it, we can discuss the issues, we can sort of do this therapy, but there's no like transformation hope, and that's what Messiah offers us. There's this radical, life-changing, permanent hope of having something that's completely broken and being remade into something that's completely new. And that's a totally different hope than the world gives us. And yet we so quickly buy this temporary false hope of just having things better or having the happy ending to the story or whatever, and at the expense of missing this radical hope of having a redemption, a permanent redemption from our sinful state as well as our broken state. And that may not mean physical relief. You know, there's people who, like you said, it's hard to relate, and we go through a very difficult thing, like with my 2-3 months of just extreme back pain. I look back at that, and that's almost a distant memory at this point, and I don't remember how hard that was. And to think about people who are, paralyzed or who have just radically difficult things that they're going through in their life, Messiah can still redeem those situations and bring incredible testimonies out of those stories.
That's really good. I think I miss out and don't give like the redemptive credit and faith in Father that like I sometimes need. I think I lean on like the understanding that like change is really hard, and it is, but like how do I explain it? Like okay, like being really raw, and this may sound so stupid, but for instance, like I love video games. I love PlayStation. Like I love all that. Like and I play games with my kids. I play games with Emily. Like that's how like I wind down like late on a weekend night or something like that. And I enjoy it and like it's fun and I get engaged and stuff. And like more than once I've had the thought of like, man, is Father like telling me to just let this go like forever? And like it seems like an impossible thing in my mind. Like I can't like redeem myself of wanting to do that or whatever. And it's weird because it's like, is a video game terrible? No, but when you hang on to it that heavy, like is it? Probably. Like I don't know. And so like just little things, starting with like a little thing like that up to who knows what, like can those things be redeemed? Like can like I come full circle and just be like the man that like I know like is possible and like I can, I want to be and stuff because like I don't know, you guys said something earlier where like the whole idea of like telling a story about like is your life story like worth telling and stuff and like like I think of friends or whatever who've like made like crazy life changes like my friend Hope and her husband Tate and their family, they just moved to the Philippines to like live there and like adopt children and like build they have to build their house, like that's like one of their first year, that's one of their tasks is they have to build their own house out of wood and stuff. And I'm just like, what? And like that, like to me, like moving there and doing what they're doing and like just knowing them, like that's like a story like worth telling, obviously. And it's just like, I don't know, like tons of people in history too that I look up to and like I don't know, they let go of those like small things that like were kind of just holding them back. And I don't know where I was going with that, but anyways, there you go.
I think it's good. Side note, pause. If a tree falls in the jungle, does anybody hear it? And the answer is yes. It's literally like a huge, like 80-foot tree. That's why I like freaked out because it made so much noise. And I was like, I thought like a herd of monkeys or something was coming through. And it was this huge tree that fell, like, and it was just crashing down all because it's so thick. It was just crashing through all these other trees, and who knows what made it fall. But that was
probably a guy cutting cables. He got a little too much cable. got some
Yeah.
tree with it.
If there was a guy in that part of the jungle, I'd be super pumped. It's like getting a foot outside of like what's been trimmed is like life-threatening territory. Anyways, I think I love the redemptive message that you shared, Andrew and Shaw. I agree that in how you were talking about applying it to our lives. And what's interesting to me about that redemption is that God is so consistent. It's just funny to me because he sets up things, he sets up principles. And if you know one principle, you can apply it to everything else because his truth is always consistent. So, but we're quick to forget it. And it's the reason that you can't take ephedrine and lose weight and have it long-term healthy, like live a healthy lifestyle. It's an artificial way to lose weight. It's an artificial way to get through something. And by doing it, you avoid the pain. You avoid the short-term pain is really what it is, of having to work out and burn calories and doing crunches, whatever you're going to do. And it's with everything, like the like sit and watch TV and lose weight and strap this thing to your belly. It doesn't actually create sustainable change, but you don't feel the pain. You don't have to go through it. But what I've noticed is that God creates this thing that tearing creates redemption. Like tearing creates growth. So in our muscles, you have to tear them for them to grow and to get stronger. In your mind, you have to like break synapses in your mind to like you have to be stretched outside of what you know, and it's like almost it's a stressful experience in your mind to learn something new for your mind to grow. And basically our entire bodies are they're muscles, right? Even your heart, like you don't know, like you could go into like how you love, and that's a whole nother thing. But I wanted to get into redemption and just like we can't do that unless we go through the pain. And society, and again, I'm not throwing away all drugs and medicine and MDs and stuff, but I do think we have a propensity to lean further into wanting to avoid pain, thinking it's going to solve and create the cure, and what we're doing is we're just taking ephedrine trying to lose weight around our bellies, and it's not effective. It's not creating long-term sustainable change, and we do things to avoid going through painful circumstances, and we write it off thinking the same result's going to happen. But it's just weird without having that tearing or that pain. Like the same result doesn't happen. You don't land in the same place. And I think it's like, for whatever it's worth, that's how God created us.
And it's amazing to think of that in the context of Yahushua's sacrifice and what he did for us, right? Like purchasing redemption, but it wasn't something that could be done lightly or easily. It had to involve that extreme pain, like to produce that result. And I think we see that pattern obviously as a result of sin in the fabric of creation and the way that there's pain in childbirth, but it produces life. And there was extreme pain that Yahushua endured for us, but it produced life. And kind of looking at that as, holding that up as the true story against what we're sold through all secular and worldly culture, and really it's a religion. It's a celebration of death is really what it is, and it's the absence of redemption. It's this alternative path to happiness that doesn't involve heart-rending pain. Like, sure, characters go through pain, they go through hard situations, whatever, but they're self-made, and that's like the lie that pervades. And I think that if we could sort of put a finger on anything, okay, why does the enemy sugarcoat everything with enough truth to get us to buy into it and to willingly consume it? And what's the payload, right? What's he trying to inject in our consciousness? And I think that payload is the idea that we can have a positive outcome without redemption, that we can have a self-made outcome, that we can we can stockpile enough food, water, and have a secure shelter so that we can save ourselves. And if you look at, if you peel evolution back, if you peel back modern psychology and all the different, humanism, socialism, all the different sort of humanity-based religions out there, you're going to arrive at this conclusion that man can save himself. And that's the fundamental premise behind all the disaster movies, all the post-apocalyptic kind of movies. The hero always comes out on top because of what the hero did, and we lose the story of redemption in that in that payload, and that's the lie that the enemy wants us to consume.
Yeah, I'm thinking about. I feel like we're getting close to the end, and I was just kind of thinking about wrapping up. But what do you guys think? Where we at?
Yeah, I think we're close. Like, I just feel like for myself and my own thinking, I think I just stumbled on something new, and even in my own observation, where it's like, well, why, and realizing my personal culpability in that. The more I consume, that's the lie I'm putting into myself. The more I relate to characters, the more I watch and do and participate, I'm really at odds with my own fundamental declared beliefs, and I'm consuming a lie that operates against who I want to be and who I am as a redeemed child of Yahweh. And when I look at it in that light, in this moment, of course, a few hours from now, I'm going to have that temptation again, and I'm going to have the choice again. But in this moment, that makes the decision very easy. Why would I consume something that's the complete opposite of who I am?
Mm-hmm.
Oh
Yeah.
man, I just thought of another layer that I should so leave alone. We'll talk about
Well,
that another time.
okay. What do you think about bringing it up? For me, I guess I'm walking away with like, how do I apply this to my life? And it's another cable Tika van. Hopefully, they're not coming to cut someone else's wires. Um, so how do I apply it to my life? And I was kind of going back to the first thing, like what makes a story engaging, or what makes a good story? And I pulled out 3 things just from hearing you guys talk that will be very helpful for me in my life. And the first one was the one big thing I got out of this is, what makes a good story? It's worth telling, and that's what makes it good, And I think Donald Miller's got a really great book called A Million Miles in a Thousand Years that really talks about that, living a life worth writing a story that it would be worth telling the story about. And so that will help me in my daily life. Like, am I living one? But then matching that up to the second thing I pulled away is that I need to not have unrealistic expectations of myself based on these top-down stories I'm consuming, or these stories where I read 2 pages of the Bible and it represents 80 years of a person's life, and expect that simultaneous thing to happen in my life instantly, not simultaneous, but instantaneous thing to happen in my life. Or a movie, 2 hours and it represents 10 years or whatever. So I need to change my expectations of how I view things for myself. And the flip side of that is appreciate the story that I am living. So that was the second thing I pulled in. And then the third thing, which I thought was the most beautiful, is that it's worth walking through hard things because there's redemption in it. And the redemption, well, one, there's hope in it. I want hope. I want to, like, I need help. I need hope. I need rescuing. And so being willing to walk through the hard things, knowing that God promises redemption and that He's always been faithful in that, is kind of the other thing that I pulled out of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. That's good. I think that begs the question, and again, just to leave it on a conclusive note, when we ask the question, what stories are worth telling, that begs the additional question, how do we define worth?
Yeah.
But no, that's good.
Yeah. I want to quote the right person. It might have been Andy Stanley. Might not have been at a Passion conference a long time ago. But somebody said they didn't use value, is very close to value, the things that you actually think are valuable are the things that you want to be known for at your funeral.
Mm. Yep, that about does it. When the last page is written, what's in the book? What has gone into the book?
Yeah. Cool. Well, Shaw, you have any other thoughts?
No, I was just writing all those goodies down.
Yeah, I jotted them down too. Those
That's
make
good, man.
good notes. Good stuff.
Well, thanks for listening.
Yes, and join us next time when we will talk talk about some of the other stuff we said we wouldn't talk about till later.
Cool.